How did the U.S. orchestrate the Bay of Pigs invasion?
I have no idea. Wait, what are these questions? Can you start it over?
What did the United States do to prevent dictators from coming into power in Latin America post World War II?
Um, Post World War II. Um, does it have something to do with the CIA doing like secret, secret missions and stuff?
Yeah. How did Fidel Castro come into power?
I don't know.
Who was Fidel Castro?
Alright, he is from Cuba. He was a dictator. And he interacted with JFK, our proud president, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And they had an interaction together.
Who was the American president during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
I'd have to say JFK.
Why was Marxism so popular in Latin America? Why has Latin America always been behind the rest of the world in industrialization?
Honestly, not that sure. I don't think they have like a lot of resources and things like that, like up in like I guess Americas and Europe.
Good.
What happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Oh god, you're getting me in the wrong spot. I can't do this. I can't do this. Sorry.
All right, good.
What happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
I honestly have no idea. Yeah, I'm probably not the best for these questions.
Go. How did Che Guevara come into power?
No clue.
Go. What was the United States' role in the Bay of Pigs invasion?
Pretty sure they had the CIA aid guerrilla fighters and overthrowing the current government. Castro just implemented, and it didn't go too well. And pretty much just got exposed.
Go.
What is ISI?
ISIS?
What was the Cuban Missile Crisis?
So the Cuban Missile Crisis was an issue during the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Russia, where America found out that Fidel Castro and his communist regime in Cuba had begun acquiring nuclear missiles from communist Russia, and that unsettled us obviously because they're so close to our coast, and having that relationship with Russia was not really great for us at the time, that they could launch those missiles so close to us. So what ended up happening was the Bay of Pigs invasion under President Kennedy, which was also a total failure. But in the end, the issue was resolved and things kind of cooled down for a little while after that.
Why has the United States always been so involved in Latin America?
It's due to the Monroe Doctrine, in which everything in the Eastern Hemisphere, we are to protect their benefits as if they are our own, therefore providing economic benefits for them.
So after conducting our interviews, our findings showed that the average student really doesn't know too much about Latin American history.
And as we found, no knowledge of some pretty knowledgeable topics of Latin America were not found.
What really shocked us is that a lot of people didn't know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was probably one of the most dangerous times in American history. And for such a significant historical event that our nation went through, it's very surprising that the general population really had no knowledge about it.
And another thing we found, not a lot of people knew about the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a disastrous invasion by the United States in 1961 to take back Cuba from the Fidel Castro regime. And we found this surprising because this led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, as JP just mentioned, which was one of the biggest events of the Cold War in world history, as it almost sparked a third world war.
What was even
So once the U.S. boycotted the Cuban sugar trade, and the Cubans looked towards the USSR, who was at the time in war with the United States in the Cold War, which made the United States very nervous knowing that they had another ally that was right there off the coast of Florida. So in 1961, the United States CIA conducted the Bay of Pigs invasion, which, as our findings found out, not a lot of people knew about this. The Bay of Pigs invasion is essentially this. The CIA trained Cuban guerrilla fighters to take back Cuba from Fidel Castro, hoping that once the revolution started and once they invaded, that an internal revolution would begin and Castro would be thrown out of power. This failed after Cubans found out about the ships going into the Bay of Pigs, and after President John F. Kennedy did not provide air support, fearing that Fidel Castro would find out about Cuban involvement, about United States involvement. So our first topic that we really discussed was a guy named Che Guevara, who was an Argentinian medical student and thought that Latin America poverty was due to the imperialistic international economy of the United States and the Western powers. While he was traveling in Mexico, he meets this guy named Fidel Castro, who was exiled from Cuba for resisting the U.S.-backed dictatorship of Batista in 1953. Together, they invaded Cuba with 80 others, and in 1958, they succeeded as the Batista dictatorship fell on the last night in the guerrillas, last night of 1958, and the guerrillas were welcomed into Havana. They executed 483 supporters of Batista in 3 months, causing the United States and other Western powers to really become angry at the regime. And when the U.S. became aware of these two and their murders, they boycotted Cuban sugar trade and
So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States had U-2 spy planes that found pictures of missile silos in Cuba, as well as missiles heading to Cuba on Russian ships. This really alarmed the United States, seeing as Cuba is only 90 miles away from Miami. So what they did was they blockaded Cuba, and the USSR sent ships to break the blockade and showed no signs of stopping for the United States. However, they balked at the last minute and turned around, headed back to Russia. I asked a lot of people about the spread of Marxism in Latin America post-World War II, and our results showed that a lot of people really don't know anything about it.
The truth about Marxism in Latin America was that it was influenced by a lot of theater and literature and books that came out around that time. Latin America, like the United States, was very paranoid about this movement. So what they did was they set up the School of the Americas and guerrilla fighters to kidnap, torture, and murder anyone who was in favor of this Marxist movement.
We really didn't expect people to know too much about the spread of Marxism throughout Latin America during the Cold War, because normally, as we learned in class, people just don't really pay attention to news in Latin America. But what really shocked us is the lack of knowledge about Cuba, because it's so close to America, and it was a key event in American Cold War history.
And going off what JP was saying, we were not surprised about Latin American Marxism, because it's not something that, the everyday American public school kid learns about, but we were pretty surprised about the Cuban Revolution, because that's a main topic in the United States public school system, and learning about John F. Kennedy and his relationship with communism and Fidel Castro and Nikita Khrushchev throughout the years. So when we were interviewing people, it was kind of shocking that not a lot of people knew about this important topic.